All right there. Hey, data lovers, and welcome to another episode of I Love Data Fridays here at the International Data Evaluation Center on the campuses of the Ohio State University. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 40 of I Love Data Fridays. So good to see you here. It has been a while since an episode of I Love Data Fridays, so I thought it was time to get one out the door. So today we are going to be talking about using the OS Scores by School on-demand report. We've had a couple previous videos about it, probably just introducing the report and everything, but today we are going to get a little more in-depth about the report. But before we talk about that, hey, who's talking data to you? Well, of course, you've got me, Jeff Breimer-Bashore, Director and Co-Principal Investigator here at the International Data Evaluation Center. And as I said, our topic is the OS Scores by Schools on-demand report. Specifically, we're going to talk about where is it, so where can you find it on the website. We're going to talk about what does it tell us, and then we're going to talk about how we can use it. So it's this probably a little bit of the second part and the third part that we've not really covered in other videos, and so we're going to hit those last two parts there hard today or for this episode and really get to know our OS Scores by School report. So hey, let's talk a little data.
I love Data Friday!
All right, so as I said, we're going to be talking about our OS Total Scores by School report. So just a couple things before we get into it. Let me quickly talk about the design of the report. So when we're going to see it, the report is going to show the growth of full program students across the entire year, from the start of the year to the end of the year. On this report, you will find one bar for each of your schools. Those bars will be ordered from left to right, from least amount of growth to most amount of growth. And then you're going to notice some dashed lines on this report. These dashed lines show the growth of full program students in the United States. So this gives us a sense of what the typical full program reading recovery student is doing in the United States from the start of the year to the end of the year. In case I didn't define it earlier, I'm defining our full program students that are children who either had a program that were discontinued or recommended. So we've got this report's going to show both discontinued and recommended students together. So one thing that this report helps us answer is how do your schools vary? In the I3 report, it talks about, a variation in results, and this report can show very clear variation in results from school to school. So by default, the report will start by showing you the growth on the OS total score, but you can, and I will show you how to do it, but you can refresh the report so it shows growth across the year on all 6 tasks, or you can choose a specific task and look at the growth on different tasks of the observation survey. Now, I'd like to say that this report is an excellent conversation starter for you and others. When you look at it, the report will bring up questions and cause conversation, and it's at that point that you then have to probably use other data sources and start digging deeper into your data to help answer those questions that come up. But it's an excellent conversation starter, especially for others. So we can use this report with principals, and we can even use it with our teachers. When you do that, though, just remember to kind of cross over any school names that you don't want to be seen by anybody, but you can certainly share this with a literacy team, a principal, or your teachers. All right, so let's see how we get to this report. So I've flipped over to the website here, and the first step that we're going to do is click on the Reports tab right up here. Next, we are going to click on the On-Demand Reports subtab down here on the left-hand side. This will open up a new window with a drop-down box. We will click on this drop-down box, and we will select the OS Scores by Schools on-demand report, third from the bottom. Okay, so we're looking at a sample of the report here. Just to kind of briefly, once again, to go over the design, I'm actually just going to read this little paragraph up here. It describes the report for you. So it says, this report shows the growth of full program students from the start of the year, which is the bottom of each bar, to the end of the school year, which is the top of each bar. There is one bar for each school. So you'll see one bar for each school. So how do we know which school it is? Well, the names of our schools are at the bottom. So if we just scroll down here, we can see, and I've got it all blurred out for you at home here, but you can see the names of the schools at the bottom of the screen here, and that is how you will know which school is which. I'm going to move this back up. All right, so the bars are ordered from left to right, from least amount of growth to most amount of growth. So least amount of growth to most amount of growth. All right, the dashed line, so you see one dashed line down here and another dashed line up here, represent the typical growth of reading recovery full program students nationally from the start of the school year to the end of the school year. So typically, usually our full program students nationally start down here and they finish up here. The taller the bar, the more growth made at the school. Nationally, full program students make about 157 points of growth. All right, so oops, didn't mean to put that up there. So you can also, so here we go. We see our schools down here, like I said, from least amount of growth to most amount of growth. For example, I'm just going to do a quick interpretation of a school. I'm just going to pick this school right here just to show you, just to do as an example. So initially, we can see that this school is making about 100, their full program students are making about 174 points of growth. And remember, if we look up here, it says nationally, our full program students make about 157 points of growth. So this school is getting a lot of growth from their students. But one thing that I noticed, though, is that their full program students are coming in much lower than what we would usually see from our full program students in the United States. The bar is starting much lower than this bottom dashed line. But they make a great amount of growth, and in fact, they almost get up to this top dashed line and get to where our full program students typically end at the end of the school year. So I kind of wonder what's happening after reading recovery and what can help. I'm also wondering what's happening in kindergarten. Beforehand. Could this be a kindergarten issue? So that's just me looking at one bar there. Now, as I said earlier, we can also look at this chart. We can also look at other tasks of the observation survey, and we can do that by going over here, clicking on this report type list. We can select a different task of the OS. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to click View Report. So every time I make a change over here, I have to come over and click View Report to refresh the screen. So it's going to refresh. And now we're looking at the hearing and recording sounds and words. And I'm going to go back to my example bar here, or the one we looked at first. Yeah, and this school is coming in really low on their phonics. I also kind of wonder if this is a low or a high poverty school too. All right, so let me go back to our OS total score. We're going to change the report type, and remember, two-step process, OS total score, click View Report. That changes it up there. Okay, so that's the layout of the report. So let's go ahead and talk about how we can sort of analyze some of our results or data in this report and start making some decisions and start making these starting conversations. So I'm going to flip back over to my slides here. So here is an example, another example report on the screen in front of us. And I am going to color code these bars. And I'm going to tell you what I'm saying these color coding means. So we see we've got three colors. We've got our black, gray, and white color codings. Now, the bars that I've shaded in black, I'm calling these the job well done schools, and as a teacher leader to continue to monitor these schools. Typically, for me, I'm just classifying that these are the schools that either start below the bottom line, like this school. It starts below the bottom line, this bottom line, and finish above the top line. It finishes just slightly above the top line. If I go back, we can see that it finishes just above the top line there. I'm also saying it's schools that start above the bottom line. So like this school is starting way above the bottom line and finish well above the top line. So it finishes way here. So even though our students are starting real high, they also finish real high. These gray bar schools, I am just calling a little more growth, a little troubleshooting needed. So schools that, look like they probably need a little more growth. So in general, they look like schools that start above the bottom line. So these schools like are starting above the bottom line. And they finish just above the top line, or not even above just above the top line right there, or close to it in this case. I have one right there that I could have gone either way on. And then also schools that start above the bottom line and finish below the bottom line. See how that one starts above and finishes just below that line up there. So a little more growth needed, a little troubleshooting probably needed by you to figure out, what's going on. And then finally, I have schools, the white schools that are just still shaded white, that more growth is needed and your attention is definitely needed. So these typically are schools that start below the bottom line, like this school down here, and finish well below the top line. See how it finishes well below the top line. Or we can be talking about schools that start above the bottom line, but finish a sizable or an distance below this top line. So in general, we've got our sort of the job well done, continue to monitor schools, these schools in black, our little troubleshooting needed schools that looks like they could probably make some more growth, and we just need to do a little troubleshooting, and then schools that are definitely need our attention and definitely some troubleshooting. So you might be listening to this sort of, by yourself right now, but we're going to call this group discussion time. So if you've got your OS total score by school report, the first thing I'm going to have you do is I'm just going to have you go through and categorize those schools by those categories we talked about. These job well dones, a little more growth schools, and more growth and definitely need your attention. But don't spend more than a minute doing this. And the reason why I'm saying this is that I don't want you to get sort of lost in the weeds of trying. I mean, these categories are helpful. They help us just focus on. They can help us focus on like the problem schools, but don't spend too much time. I spent a little bit trying to figure out if this was a gray bar or a white bar, and I ended up just coding it gray, and that's fine. It could have gone white, I think, as well, and that's fine. Just get them coded, and if you want to change the coding later at a later date, that's fine. So I'm going to go back to our sample report that we were looking at earlier, and I'm going to take a screenshot, and I'm going to go ahead and code the bars real quick. Okay, I'm in a paint program now, and I'm going to go ahead and start color coding my bars. I think I'm going to code these for black. Like these seem to be like job well done schools. Like this one is starting below and finishing above. These ones are starting above and finishing above the line enough. Though these two, I think they might be able to get a little bit more, but I think they're good. Now let's go to gray schools. I think I'm going to code this one gray, because it's starting way below and it's making a great amount of growth. But I think we need to do some troubleshooting to help it get it up here. And it might be like kindergarten troubleshooting. And then my last two schools, I'm just going to leave white because these are the classical sort of, they start above the line, but they don't quite get all the way up to the top where we would expect them to maybe get above the top line there. So there we go. We've coded our schools. We've spent less than a minute doing it. All right, so next step, after labeling the schools, you can ask yourself the question, does anything surprise you? There's anything surprising about our labeling of these schools? I'm just thinking about it here real quick. Now, this is a hard question for me to answer. I don't know anything about these schools on the screen. As a teacher leader, you guys intimately know your schools. And, if you were surprised by this result right here, this could be a question of like, or you could be a good sort of internal question. Why is it surprising me? So I'm actually going to leave that to you. Think about what surprises you, and let's go on to our next question. All right. If you use the same general labels to list the schools according to their overall discontinuation rate, what would these lists be the same or different? Talk about that. What does it make you think about or wonder? All right, so if we were to put the discontinuing rate for these schools on here, I wonder what would make us wonder. All right, so through the magic of film editing, we're going to do that. All right, so here is our full program discontinuing rates above our schools. So let's look at that and let's see if anything kind of makes us wonder. And not in general, what our chart shows that the higher growth schools tend to have a higher discontinuing rate, with one exception. This school right here, and I'm not surprised that their full program discontinuing rate is 53%. Their students are coming in much lower than what we would expect reading recovery students to come in. So they have a discontinuing rate that would actually, if we were to put this in order, would put them down over here somewhere. But I think this is a perfect example of showing teachers these teachers are doing a solid job. Look at the deficit that they have to start with and the growth that they get out of their students. You remember, we usually get 157 points of growth, and these teachers are getting 174 points of growth. So this is a job well done, certainly. So the question is, what can we do to help? I think is what can we do in kindergarten to help these teachers here? If we move just this bar up this little bit higher, and then that would allow us, that push this side up, then they would be there. These students would be right at where we would expect our full program students to be at the end of the school year. I'm a little surprised by this discontinuing rate. This seems maybe a little low with how high the bar is at the end of the year. Once again, I don't know the story of this school, so I don't know what's going on. And then certainly I'm not surprised by these 46% discontinuing rates at these schools. There is, it still doesn't change my conversation of like, what is happening after reading recovery? These kids probably made accelerated growth, and then it stopped after reading recovery. What's happening in these schools? All right, so that's the little conversation about the discontinuing rate. Now let's look what else for our discussion time here. Oop, let me clear that off the screen. Oop, there we go. Next up we have, all right, so I can't answer this one, but you can ask yourself this, and maybe with a colleague, take a second and talk about the two schools in your data with the highest and the lowest overall growth. Without thinking too much about this, talk to a neighbor, talk to your colleague for 2 minutes about the schools in each category. What common themes, characteristics do you find in higher and lower growth schools? And then finally, as you've been going through this, I want you to ask yourself this question. How many times did you say to yourself out loud, well, that's my school where, and let me just tell you, this is a big thing I get at the table. When I show this chart and ask people about certain schools, I get what I call the well, that's. Well, that's my school where I had my one teacher in training. Well, that's my school where the classroom teachers don't seem to be helping. Well, that's my school. If you found yourself saying, well, that's my school where, that's probably a school that needs your attention. If we go back to our example schools, these white bars are probably our well, that schools. Well, that's my school where such and such. This might be a well, that school, but I don't know. I think this is a kindergarten school, or a high poverty school. So if you utter the words, well, that's my school where, that school definitely needs your attention. All right, folks. Well, I think that brings us to a close of this episode of I Love Data Fridays and a deeper look into our OS Scores by School report. So I'm going to flip screens here and cue our come on back there and cue the outro music. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching another episode of I Love Data Fridays. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button there. And folks, I will say we will talk data to you later.